Hello everyone. Today, let's continue the story of the single mother, Diệu Hân. I hope you enjoy the video. Inside the stark white hospital room, silence hung heavy, broken only by the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Hân gently pushed the door open, her heart tightening as she saw Ton lying motionless on the hospital bed. His face was pale, and blood still faintly stained the bandages wrapped around his chest, silent proof of the pain he had endured to protect her. Hân slowly walked closer, her eyes red and teary. She sat down beside the bed and held his cold hand tightly. A wave of guilt and sorrow surged through her. If it hadn't been for her, Ton might never have suffered such serious injuries. She whispered softly, her voice trembling. "Ton, you have to wake up soon, okay? There's still so much I haven't told you. Don't leave me alone." Every second dragged on endlessly. Anxiety wrapped around her heart like a vice. She was terrified of what would happen if Ton didn't wake up soon. Deep down, there was only one wish left in her: to see him open his eyes and smile at her like he used to. At this moment, perhaps no one was more worried than Hân. She pushed aside everything related to tea, and devoted all her energy to taking care of Ton. Day after day, she stayed by his bedside, wiping his body, adjusting the blankets, watching his every small movement as if afraid that one moment of carelessness might bring disaster. Every time the doctor said that Ton's condition was improving, her heart would lighten just a little, but the worry never truly went away. Yet, behind her concern for Ton, a deeper unease lingered. She knew that while she was rushing him to the hospital, T had seized the chance to escape. He was cunning and dangerous. As long as he remained free, he was like a lurking shadow threatening her and her child's safety. As night fell and the hospital grew quiet, Hân sat by the bed, gazing at Ton's unconscious face. She squeezed his hand more tightly and silently promised, "Don't worry. I'll protect this family, and myself too. But you have to wake up. I can't face all of this alone." Outside, the dark night sky loomed, as if foreshadowing the storm still waiting ahead. Hân sat quietly by the hospital bed, the soft yellow light in the room making the atmosphere feel even more still. She had been there for hours without eating or drinking, her eyes darkened by many sleepless nights. Each time she looked at Ton lying motionless, her heart clenched in pain. Just then the door opened and Ton's parents walked in. Worry was clearly written on their faces, though they tried to stay calm so as not to make Hân more anxious. The woman gently placed her hand on Hân's shoulder and spoke softly. "You've worked so hard, dear. If you keep staying here like this, you'll collapse. Go home and rest for a bit. We'll take care of everything here." The man nodded, his eyes full of concern. "We're here for Ton, so don't worry. Little Tom needs his mother at home. Go back and rest. If anything happens, we'll call you right away." Hearing that, Hân lowered her head, gratitude filling her heart. The truth was, she was already feeling uneasy thinking about her son Tom. Since the day Ton was injured, she'd left him in the care of their neighbors while she stayed at the hospital day and night. A pang of guilt grew heavier in her chest. As she stepped into the hallway, she suddenly saw Tom curled up asleep on a folding chair. His innocent face was covered in tiny beads of sweat, and his small hands clutched the corner of his shirt, seeking comfort. Hân quickly hurried over and gently lifted him into her arms. Still half asleep, Tom nuzzled into her shoulder and mumbled softly, "Mom, has Uncle Ton woken up yet?" The simple question pierced her heart. She held him tighter and whispered, "Uncle Ton will wake up soon, sweetheart. Let's go home and rest now, okay?" After carefully giving instructions to Ton's parents, Hân carried Tom out of the hospital. Night had fully fallen outside, and the streetlights stretched along the empty road. The shadows of the mother and child stretched across the pavement, quiet and small. Inside Hân's heart, worries piled up for Tom, and for the danger that T still posed somewhere out there. But she knew she had to be strong now for her son and for herself. Back home, Han gently laid Tom on the bed, tucked him in carefully, and sat beside him, watching his peaceful sleeping face. The dim bedside lamp cast a warm glow around the room, wrapping it in silence. But inside her there was no peace at all. She lay down but tossed and turned, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Images from the day kept replaying like a slow-motion film. Tana's panicked voice calling her name, the moment he threw himself in front of Ti's blade to shield her, the sight of his blood-soaked shirt on the way to the hospital. Each memory sent a sharp ache through her chest. Tears silently welled up in her eyes. She covered her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud, afraid of waking Tom. A wave of guilt rose, choking her. If it weren't for her, Tom wouldn't have been hurt so badly, lying now in that cold hospital room. Outside the window, the night wind whistled through the cracks, bringing a chill that made Han shiver. But the coldest place was inside her, where fear and worry filled every corner. She dreaded the thought of something happening at the hospital while she wasn't there. The idea squeezed her heart painfully. She sat up suddenly, ready to run back to the hospital. But then her eyes fell on Tom, sleeping peacefully, cheeks flushed, breathing steady. She froze. She knew she couldn't leave her son alone at home in the middle of the night. Han buried her face in her hands, closed her eyes, and forced herself to calm down. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, "Ton, you have to wake up soon. I'm sorry. This is all my fault." That night felt unbearably long for Han. The worry for Ton, the guilt, and the fear tangled together, keeping her awake almost until dawn. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet resolve began to form. When Ton woke up, she would put an end to Ti's threat once and for all, so no one else would have to suffer again. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Han was already awake. She had spent a restless night, hardly sleeping at all, yet she still pushed herself to get up early to take care of things at home. After checking to make sure Tom was still sound asleep, she quietly went down to the kitchen, opened a bamboo basket, and carefully gathered the eggs that the backyard hens had laid over the past few days. She planned to bring these eggs to her neighbor Mrs. Men, a kind and trusted friend, to leave them there before heading to the hospital to visit Ton early. As she walked to her neighbor's house, the cool morning breeze carried the fresh scent of grass and fields, soothing her weary heart just a little. Seeing Han carrying a basket of eggs, Mrs. Men, who was sweeping the yard, looked up with a warm smile. "Oh, Hun, you're up early. What brings you here?" Han set the basket down and replied softly, "I brought some eggs for you. I was hoping you could keep them for me while I go visit Ton at the hospital." But before Han could finish, Mrs. Men waved her hand, her voice firm yet full of affection. No, I can't take these. You should sell them. Times are tough for you now, and a few dozen eggs could bring in some money." Han was caught off guard, replying hesitantly, I don't really know where to sell them. And it's not that many anyway." Mrs. Men laughed, wiped her hands on her apron and said, "Go to the village market. People there often buy fresh eggs to resell. Your eggs are clean and come from free-range chickens. People will love that. You can make a bit of money for food or medicine for Ton." Her sincere advice made Han pause. Ever since Ton was hospitalized, all the household expenses had fallen on her shoulders. The money she'd saved was already spent on hospital fees. Hearing Mrs. Men's suggestion suddenly seemed like a reasonable idea. After a moment of thought, she decided to follow it. Han returned home, collected more eggs from the nests, carefully picked out the cleanest and nicest ones, and arranged them neatly in a straw-lined basket to prevent cracking. Looking at the full basket, she felt a mix of nervousness and hope. It had been a long time since she'd thought about earning extra income like this. Soon after, wearing her conical hat and carrying the basket, Han set out along the village path toward the market. The crowing of roosters and the sound of motorbikes from early vendors filled the crisp morning air. Although worry for Ton still lingered in her heart, she knew she had to stay strong for her and her son's future, and to support Ton through this difficult time. On the road to the market, Han's small figure moved with newfound determination. This might have been just the beginning of a new day, but it also marked the quiet start of a change in her life. By the time she reached the market, dawn had broken. The village market was coming alive with chatter, the hum of motorbikes, and lively voices. Han found an empty spot near the vegetable stalls, laid out a small burlap sack, and gently placed her basket of eggs on top. At first she was shy, unsure how to call out to customers. But soon early shoppers began noticing the neat, clean eggs. "Are these free-range eggs? You can tell they're from naturally raised chickens. They must be delicious." Their comments gave her confidence. Smiling softly, she explained to each curious customer that the eggs came from her own backyard hens, raised naturally without industrial feed. The women at the market, always fond of fresh produce, quickly started buying by the dozens. One person bought, then another stopped by, and soon a small crowd formed. Before long, more than half her basket was empty. A nearby vendor laughed and said, "You're quite the seller, girl. You've almost sold out already." Han blushed and smiled, warmth flooding her heart. By the time the sun was up, her basket was completely sold out. The money she earned wasn't a huge amount, but it was the first income she'd made with her own hands after days filled with worry and exhaustion. Looking at the neatly folded bills in her hand, she felt a strange sense of relief and accomplishment. After greeting a few familiar faces at the market, Han hurried home. She wanted to be on time to pick up Tom and head to the hospital to see Ton. As she walked along the familiar village road, golden rice fields stretched out on both sides, and the early wind blew gently through her hair. Her heart felt lighter than it had in days. When she arrived home, Tom was already awake, waiting on the porch. The moment he saw her, he ran out excitedly and wrapped his arms around her waist. Han laughed, bent down, and ruffled his hair. "Mom's home, sweetheart. You've been such a good boy." Hand in hand, the two of them walked along the familiar path back into the village. Tom's cheerful chatter echoed in the crisp morning air, sweeping away the last of Han's worries. Though deep down she was still concerned about Ton and uneasy knowing T was still on the loose, at that moment, a small spark of hope flickered inside her. She understood that life must go on, and as long as she kept moving forward step by step, brighter days would eventually come. Han held Tom's hand as they walked along the familiar village path, her mind busy planning the day ahead. She intended to tidy up the house quickly, prepare some food, and then head to the hospital early to visit Ton. After a long sleepless night, all she wanted was to see him with her own eyes, lying there safe and sound, just to reassure herself that he was okay. But as the two of them walked past a narrow bamboo-lined path, the shortcut leading from the market back toward their home, a figure suddenly emerged from the roadside bushes. Han froze in shock, her heart pounding wildly. A moment later, another man stepped out from behind the trees. The slanted morning light fell across the scene, illuminating the sinister face of the man standing in front of her. It was T. His narrowed eyes and sly half-smile sent a chill down her spine. He stood with his arms crossed, blocking their way, while the other man moved to the side, forming a threatening enclosure around her. "Long time no see, Han," T drawled slowly, his voice dripping with menace. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Instinctively, Han pulled Tom tightly into her arms, the protective instinct of a mother surging within her. She took a step back, eyes sharp and wary as she faced the two men. "Get out of my way. I have nothing to say to you." T burst out laughing, the sound echoing eerily through the quiet path, laced with cruelty. He stepped closer, while his accomplice moved behind them, cutting off any escape route. "What's the rush? Ignoring me this early in the morning, that's cold. Han, yelling won't help you. No one comes through here this time of day." Han's face drained of color. It was true, this area was rather isolated. Early in the morning, most people were either working in the fields or heading to the market. Hardly anyone passed by. Even if she screamed, it was unlikely anyone would hear. Still, she refused to give in. Summoning all her courage, she shouted as loud as she could, "Help! Somebody help us!" Her voice echoed into the empty air but received no reply. He seemed to enjoy this. He cast a smug glance at his companion and grinned. "See? I told you. No one's going to hear you here. The more scared you are, the more fun this is for me." Han clutched Tom even tighter, feeling his small body trembling in her arms. Her heart was racing, but a spark of determination flickered in her eyes. She knew that if she panicked now, both she and her son would be in real danger. T took another step forward, his voice slick and threatening. "We have unfinished business, you and I. Looks like fate is on my side today." The air grew tense, suffocating. The familiar village road suddenly felt like a trap, and Han, with her young son, was cornered. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a way to escape. But how? All around them were bamboo trees, empty fields, and two dangerous men closing in. After being cornered, Han clutched Tom tightly to her chest and tried to back away, but both T and the other man closed in, leaving her no escape. T suddenly reached out, grabbing her arm and yanking it hard, nearly causing her to fall. "Let go of me!" Han screamed, struggling fiercely. T smirked and tightened his grip, while his accomplice stepped forward, reaching for the basket she was carrying. Tom burst into terrified sobs, his cries echoing painfully along the deserted path. "Where do you think you can run, Han?" T growled, his eyes glinting with menace. But at that moment, Han's survival instinct flared up powerfully. She didn't have time to be afraid anymore. Taking advantage of the brief moment when T turned his head to signal his partner, she suddenly shoved him with all her strength, then swiftly kicked the other man in the shin, making him stumble. "Run!" she shouted, lifting Tom into her arms and sprinting forward. T cursed loudly, staggered back, and immediately gave chase, his accomplice right behind him. The sound of pounding footsteps grew closer and closer. Han's heart hammered in her chest, her breathing came in ragged gasps, but she forced herself to keep running, clutching her son tightly as she dashed through the narrow path lined with bamboo and overgrown weeds. She glanced over her shoulder. The two men were still chasing relentlessly. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a large, thick bush by the side of the path, dense enough to hide them. Without a second thought, she darted into it, moving as quickly and quietly as she could to avoid making noise. The sharp branches scraped against her skin, stinging painfully, but she didn't make a sound. She hugged Tom close to her chest and covered his mouth gently as the sound of the men's footsteps drew near. "She ran this way." Ti's irritated voice rang out. "She can't have gotten far. Search carefully," the accomplice replied. Han held her breath, her heart racing wildly. The leaves of the bush trembled slightly with each of her shallow breaths. Tom was trembling with fear, but thankfully stayed quiet in his mother's arms. Outside, the two men spread out to search. The crunch of dry grass under their feet and the snapping of twigs made the air unbearably tense. Han squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to stay completely silent. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, almost as if nature itself was helping to conceal them. T stepped right past the bush where Han and Tom were hiding. He was so close that she could clearly see the muddy soles of his shoes through the gaps in the leaves. She held her breath, her heartbeat seeming to stop altogether. If he so much as pulled the branches apart, it would all be over. "Split up and search. That woman won't get away from me," he barked. Their shadows slowly began to drift farther away, but Han knew that even the slightest mistake could expose them. Terror surged inside her, mingled with fierce determination. She would not let them catch her. Not for herself, and not for the little boy trembling in her arms. Han curled herself up tightly in the bushes, trying to remain absolutely silent. She held Tom close against her chest, feeling both their heartbeats pounding wildly, as if ready to burst out of their rib cages. Sweat trickled down her forehead, even though the early morning air was still cool. Just a few steps away, T stood scanning the area, his sharp eyes darting around like a predator sensing its prey hiding nearby. Han held her breath, barely daring to move, silently praying that he would just leave. But just as she began to hope they might escape, T suddenly froze. He crouched down, his eyes narrowing with a sinister gleam as he spotted a trail of small muddy footprints leading straight toward the bush where she was hiding. "Ah, there you are," he growled, his mouth twisting into a cruel smile. Before Han could react, he lunged forward like a wild animal, violently pulling the branches apart and grabbing her arm in a harsh grip, yanking her out from her hiding spot. "Got you. Thought you could get away, huh?" he roared triumphantly. Panic surged through Han as she struggled frantically, trying to wrench her arm free while screaming at the top of her lungs. "Let go of me! Help! Somebody help us!" Her desperate cries echoed down the empty road, but no one answered. T only tightened his grip, pain shooting through her arm. She kicked and thrashed wildly, refusing to give in. Beside them, little Tom stood frozen in terror, tears streaming down his face. He burst into heart-wrenching sobs, crying out, "Mommy! Mommy, don't let them take you!" The sound of her son's terrified voice lit a fierce flame inside Han. She struggled even harder, clawing and punching Ti's arm, screaming until her voice grew hoarse. But he was far stronger, easily holding her in his iron-like grasp. "Shut up!" he snarled, dragging her toward the middle of the path. "If you keep fighting, that brat is next." At the mention of her son, Han froze for a brief moment. Just a few steps away, Tom was crying uncontrollably, his terrified eyes locked on her as she was being dragged across the ground. Her heart twisted painfully at the sight. Ti's accomplice was already running toward them, shouting, "Did you get her? Don't let her escape this time." The air grew chaotic. The rustling of bamboo in the wind, Tom's cries, and the sounds of the struggle echoed through the deserted path. Han's eyes darted around desperately, her mind spinning for a way out. She knew that if she were captured now, both she and her son would be in grave danger. She bit down on her lip so hard it bled, vowing not to surrender. And then in the middle of the chaos, her gaze fell on a thick broken bamboo branch lying nearby. A glimmer of hope flickered amid the despair. Will Han be able to escape from T this time? Stay tuned to find out in the next video.
Xin chào mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Và hy vọng là những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ và hạnh phúc. Hiện tại những video của mình đang được phát sóng vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối tại giờ Việt Nam. Thì mọi người nhớ chú ý đón xem nha. Nếu cảm thấy yêu thích kênh của mình thì rất mong được mọi người like, share và bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất. Đặc biệt là mọi người nhớ để lại cho mình một nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để mình cải thiện những video sau hay và hấp dẫn hơn. Và sắp tới thì mình sẽ cố gắng làm thêm nhiều câu chuyện hay hơn để cho mọi người cùng xem và theo dõi. Mình hy vọng là sẽ được sự ủng hộ của mọi người. Rất vui vì thời gian qua mọi người đã đồng hành cùng mình. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại ở video lần sau nha. Chào mọi người.